So a lot of people are going crazy about what Kathy Griffin did. It was an embarrassment to her and her peers, I guess, if you want to say that. But I'm not completely convinced that people understand what was underlying with what she did. It's not that she was doing propaganda or supporting ISIS or anything like that. I'm not a Kathy Griffin fan, so I'm not trying to defend her. But what I think she was doing was exercising her freedom. The freedoms that you get in this country, the freedom to express yourself, the freedom to say what you want, when you want, how you want. Our very own president has used this right before he became president on Twitter, to say all kinds of nonsense and whatnot. So this is just a matter of exercising their freedoms. Unfortunately for her, it kind of backfired, thinking she might have gotten support from a lot of people. Though I'm not completely convinced that she is not going to have support from a lot of people, because there's probably a lot of people who wish to see the president's head on a platter, or simply just, for this man to be gone. If you just look at the reactions to him winning the presidency, if you just check on YouTube and you look at the reactions from people on YouTube when he won the presidency, you would think that the devil himself won the presidency. So I think there's more to it than just a Photoshop picture or a picture of a mannequin being held by Kathy Griffin. But what's more concerning to me as a Christian, as a person who's a follower of Christ, who's a lover of Christ, and by being a lover of Christ, I have to love my brothers and sisters in Christ, have to have compassion. The Bible calls me an ambassador, the person who God uses to make an appeal to the world, to reconcile people to himself, to be light and to be salt. What is concerning to me is that many Christians use and exercise their very same rights or freedoms or liberties as a Christian to do things that affect and harm and even offend other people. Now, for example, I know many Christians who believe that drinking a beer is not a sin. I personally don't think it's a sin. I don't see anything wrong with a man or a woman or whoever in a responsible way in their home, or maybe even going out to dinner with a couple of friends, to be responsible and drinking a beer or wine or champagne or some type of alcoholic drink. I don't think it's a sin. However, it can be a stumbling block, and therefore it becomes sinful. And many of our brothers and sisters in Christ, understanding that they have freedoms in Christ or liberty in Christ, exercise their freedoms in a way where it's detrimental to other people. Romans 14, for example, talks about not doing things that harm the weaker brother or the weaker believer. Or in this case, in the context of Romans 14, you would have to believe that Paul is talking about the legalistic people. We have to be compassionate and mindful that some brothers and sisters find alcohol to be a sin. Not only that, there are people who are believers and non-believers alike who struggle with alcoholism, who have dealt with alcoholism, who have family members who struggle with alcoholism. And for us to take pictures and use social media as a platform to embrace our freedoms as Christians, not taking into consideration the damage that it could cause, whether it just be one. Christ was concerned about one child, or us being a stumbling block for just one person. He's mindful of that. And yet many Christians use their freedoms and their platform, social media being one of them, to express themselves because they have freedom in Christ. What Kathy Griffin did today, I don't expect any less, any better, anything. I honestly don't expect anything from Kathy Griffin. Kathy Griffin is not as far as I'm concerned, or that I know anything about her, but she's not a professing believer in Christ. And if she does claim to be a believer, it's obvious that the things she says, the things she does is not consistent with that of a believer. So I don't put standards on Kathy Griffin to be any other way. But Christians, us fellow believers in Christ, lovers of Christ, that should relate to each other, should love each other, even not only each other, but loving people around us, the world. We are held to a standard, and yet we rather give in to our fleshly desire to prove people wrong, or to mock the legalism of others. We rather that and disguise it as freedom in Christ. So, to me personally, and I might be wrong in many different levels, but when I saw the picture with Kathy Griffin, I saw a non-believer exercising her freedoms given to her by the country she lives in to speak against a man who is vilified by many people, and a man who has used his own platforms and his own freedoms to alienate a lot of people. But Christians, we do the same exact thing. We just do it differently and disguise it differently. We give it nice Christian words. We even apply Christ to our disregard for others. And it's sad. It's sad. I come from a family that has dealt with alcoholism, and there are many families that deal with alcoholism or any type of ism. And for Christians to use their platforms to exercise their rights and freedoms is it's almost un-Christ-like. It is. It's sad. And Kathy Griffin today demonstrated in a very interesting way what it looks like to some of our fellow believers or non-believers when we hold up something in our hands that can be offensive and hurtful, even if it's just to one person. What that looks like, because we're exercising our freedoms. So I encourage believers, I encourage those who I was going to say non-believers, but I don't expect anything from those who don't profess faith in Christ. But those who do, the standard is much higher. The commands for us are much, much greater. And the amount of love that we need to display should transcend whatever desire, whatever craving, whatever it is that we have. That love of Christ for us, and the love that we should have for Christ, and the love we should have for each other, should be greater than whatever thing we want to do just because we can. Paul said that even though there's many things he can do, not all those things are beneficial.